The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of Little Steps Preschool, casting warm light on the pastel walls and tiny desks. Mia Carter, 27, knelt beside a group of 4-year-olds, helping them fit puzzle pieces together. Her soft smile and gentle voice always made the children feel safe. But outside the cheerful bubble of this classroom, danger lurked. The first sign came as a loud thud from the hallway, followed by the squeak of the door handle. Before Mia could stand, the door swung open, and 3 boys, older, towering over the toddlers, slipped in with smug grins. They didn't belong here. They were local high school troublemakers, already infamous for vandalizing the playground fence last week. Today, they had their eyes on something more personal. "Nice buttons, teacher," one of them sneered, his voice dripping mockery. Mia froze. The children, sensing something wrong, went silent, their eyes wide. She rose slowly, her hands instinctively lowering to her blouse. The tallest boy stepped forward, his hand darting out before she could react. The sharp pop, pop, pop of buttons snapping echoed in the tiny room. Gasps filled the air as fabric gaped open, exposing the top of her camisole. Giggles and confused whispers from the children pierced Mia's ears like needles. Heat surged up her neck, not from shame alone, but from fury. She clasped the fabric closed with one arm, her other hand clenching at her side. The boys laughed, tossing the buttons like coins onto the floor. Didn't think a preschool had this kind of entertainment. Another one jeered, glancing around to see if anyone dared stop them. Mia's instincts screamed to act, but she stopped herself. This was not the place, not with 20 little faces watching their innocence on the line. She swallowed the fire rising in her chest and spoke evenly. "Leave, now." They snorted, muttering insults under their breath as they strolled out unhurried, as if they owned the place. The door slammed behind them. The children's questions tumbled over each other. "Miss Mia, why did they do that? Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" She forced her voice to stay calm. "It's okay, class. Let's finish our puzzles." But her heart was hammering. Inside, memories from years ago flared her days as a regional self-defense champion, standing on the mat flipping opponents twice her size. She had given it up to teach trading adrenaline for the joy of shaping young minds. But humiliation like this, she hadn't felt it in years. And she wouldn't let it slide. As the morning dragged on, every laugh, every cheer from the playground felt muffled under the weight of what had happened. Her students clung to her a little more than usual, sensing her unease. She kept smiling for them, but behind that smile was a silent vow. "You picked the wrong teacher to humiliate." Mia glanced toward the hallway where they had vanished. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And next time, they wouldn't be the ones laughing. The day passed in a haze of forced smiles and automatic routines. Mia guided the children through story time, snack breaks, and nap hour. But her mind was far from the cheerful songs and lesson plans. Each time she bent to pick up a crayon or tie a shoelace, her fingers brushed the loose fabric of her blouse, a reminder of the crude hands that had torn it open. By the final bell, the hallways were filled with the chatter of parents collecting their children. Mia kept her head high, pretending nothing was wrong. But as soon as the last child left, she closed the classroom door and leaned against it, her breath escaping in a slow, heavy sigh. Alone at last, she let her mask slip. Her hands trembled as she gathered the fallen buttons from the floor, each one a tiny insult pressed into her palm. She turned them over, remembering the smirk on the tall boy's face. She could still hear the rip feel the heat of embarrassment spreading across her skin, while her students sat frozen in shock. Mia pressed her lips together, forcing herself to stay calm. This wasn't just about her. It was about the example she set for her kids. They had seen something ugly today, cowardice disguised as power. If she let it pass, she would be teaching them that bullies could act without consequence. That was unacceptable. She sank into her chair, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. Gone was the meek, harmless figure the boys thought they could toy with. Beneath the modest cardigan and tidy skirt was a body trained for speed, precision, and devastating efficiency. Years ago, she had walked away from the competitive self-defense circuit after winning her last gold medal. Teaching had given her purpose, but now those skills felt like a blade gathering dust. Her mind replayed the old training hall, the smell of sweat and mats, the sharp thwack of strikes hitting pads, her coach's voice drilling techniques into muscle memory. She still remembered the sensation of an opponent's wrist twisting under her grip, the shock in their eyes when they realized they couldn't escape. The thought sparked something cold and clear inside her. She wasn't going to report this to the principal. She wasn't going to ask for help. She was going to handle it herself, but not in the heat of the moment, and not in front of the children. This had to be done where no little eyes would see, yet where the bullies would never forget. By the time she packed her bag and stepped out into the crisp evening air, her plan had started to form. She knew where those boys hung out after school, the abandoned basketball court near the back of the community center. She'd passed it on her morning runs, seen them lounging on the benches with their cheap energy drinks and louder-than-life bravado. Her fingers curled around her phone. She could make this easy. Invite them under a pretense, make them think she'd decided to forgive them. Bullies thrived on the belief that their victims were too weak to fight back. She'd feed that belief until they walked willingly into her trap. As she reached her car, Mia's reflection in the driver's window caught her eye again. She buttoned her cardigan tighter, not to hide, but to contain the storm building beneath. Tomorrow, she would smile, as if nothing had happened. But soon they'd meet a version of Miss Carter they would never forget. The next morning, Mia's smile returned, polished, warm, and convincing. The children never suspected the wheels turning behind it. She taught phonics-supervised finger painting and sang the good morning song with the same cheerful energy as always. But every free moment, her mind was refining the plan. When the last parent collected their child, she strolled to the staff parking lot. She spotted one of the culprits, Dylan, the shortest of the three, loitering near the bike rack outside the high school. He froze when he saw her, then smirked, as if to remind her of her place. Mia's voice was smooth. "Dylan," she said, "I need to talk to you." He hesitated but swaggered closer. "What, you gonna cry to the principal?" She shook her head. "No, I wanted to make things right. Maybe I overreacted yesterday. I'm organizing an after-school event for the preschool, need some strong guys to help set things up. There's food music, and I'd make sure your principal knows you help the community." His eyes narrowed, suspicious. "What kind of event?" "Tomorrow night. The old gym at the community center," she said. 7 sharp. "Bring your friends. You'll get free pizza." "The magic word." Dylan's smirk returned. "Fine, we'll be there." By the following day, Mia had everything ready. She called in a favor from her old coach, who still had keys to the community center's unused martial arts room. The space was perfect padded floor, no prying eyes, and walls that muffled noise. She set up a few tables in the hallway, with harmless craft supplies, just enough to make it look like a kids' event, before she guided them inside. At exactly 7, the door creaked open. Dylan arrived with the other 2 Brent, the tall ringleader, and Corey, the one who laughed the loudest. They walked in with exaggerated confidence, Brent tossing an empty soda can into a corner. "No kids here," Brent muttered. "What's this, teacher?" Mia closed the door behind them with a click. The sound echoed in the empty room. She stepped forward, calm, her heels tapping against the mats. This, she said, is where we fix a problem. Corey laughed. What problem? You embarrassed, 'cause we gave you a show. Her eyes locked onto his. You embarrassed me in front of my students. You think that makes you strong. Let's test that theory. The boys glanced at each other, confused but intrigued. Brent sneered. You gonna hit us, teacher? Go ahead. We'll make you regret it. Mia's lips curved, not in amusement, but in something sharper. She removed her cardigan, revealing a fitted athletic top beneath. Her posture shifted subtly, shoulders squared, weight balanced. It was the stance of someone ready to move fast. Don't worry, she said softly. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to teach you what respect feels like. They laughed again, but unease was creeping into their voices. Brent stepped forward, hands out, as if to shove her. The moment his palm touched her shoulder, Mia's hand snapped up, twisting his wrist in a perfect joint lock. His grin collapsed into a howl as his knees buckled. Corey took a step forward, then stopped, watching Brent's face turn red. Dylan shifted nervously toward the door, but Mia's eyes pinned him in place. Not yet, she murmured. Lesson's just starting. Brent's knees hit the mat with a dull thud, his face twisted in shock and pain. Mia released him, just enough for him to slump back, gasping. Her voice was low, controlled, and utterly calm. That's the wrist you used to grab my shirt. I thought you might like to feel what it's like to lose control of it. Corey's bravado cracked first. Hey, we were just messing around. Messing around. Mia's gaze cut to him like a blade. In front of children. You think humiliation is a game. He tried to scoff, but the sound died in his throat. Still pride pushed him forward. You gonna try that on me? She didn't answer. She simply moved. One step, a pivot, and her leg swept in a clean arc, hooking his ankle. Corey's balance vanished, and he slammed onto the mat with a winded groan. Before he could recover, she planted one knee beside his ribs, her forearm pressing lightly against his throat, not enough to harm, but enough to make his eyes widen in alarm. Stay down, she said, each word as precise as a blade. Dylan was pressed against the far wall now, his earlier smirk long gone. We get it, okay? You can fight. Just let us go. Not yet. She rose smoothly, letting Corey scramble backward on his hands. You're all going to understand why you will never touch me, or any woman like that again. Brent, face flushed, tried to stand, but Mia's hand caught his collar. A sharp hip turn, and he was airborne for a moment, before landing flat on his back. The breath rushed from his lungs in a single, ragged gasp. She stood over them, her breathing steady, posture loose, but ready. I was a self-defense instructor before I became a teacher. I've trained with people twice your size and faster than you'll ever be. You thought I was weak because I teach children, but you've confused kindness with weakness. Silence filled the room, except for their heavy breathing. The fight had drained from them, replaced by something colder, fear. Mia stepped closer to Dylan, the last one still unscathed. And you, she said softly, were the one who laughed the loudest. Let's see how funny it feels when the joke's on you. She didn't strike him. Instead, she stepped in so fast that her hand tapped the center of his chest, just enough to make him stumble back into the wall. Her eyes locked on his, unblinking. Remember this feeling. The next time you even think about crossing a line, you'll feel it before you move. The three of them sat or crouched on the mat, now the cocky posture's gone, replaced with slumped shoulders and darting eyes. Mia picked up her cardigan from the floor, slipping it on with the same deliberate calm she had worn all day. We're done here. Tomorrow morning, you will meet me in my classroom before the children arrive. You will apologize. Every word will be heard by the staff. If you refuse, we will have this conversation again, and I promise it will be less gentle. No one argued. She opened the door, letting the night air wash into the room. Go. They didn't walk. They stumbled, limping slightly, the echo of the mats underfoot, following them out into the dark. Mia stayed behind, listening until their footsteps faded. Only then did she let herself exhale. The fire inside her was banked now, not extinguished, waiting for tomorrow's final act. The following morning, Little Steps Preschool was as quiet as dawn, the usual cheerful chaos still an hour away. Mia stood at the front of her classroom, sunlight spilling across the tidy rows of tiny chairs. On her desk sat a neat stack of activity sheets, a vase of daisies from a grateful parent, and most importantly, 3 empty chairs she had set apart for her expected visitors. At 7:55, the door creaked open. Brent entered first, eyes fixed on the floor, his swagger replaced by a stiff shuffle. Corey followed, one hand rubbing his side where the mat had met him hard the night before. Dylan was last dragging his feet like a child about to face detention. "Sit," Mia said simply. They obeyed without question. She leaned against her desk, arms crossed, her tone calm, but edged with steel. "Do you remember what you did yesterday morning?" "Yes, ma'am," Brent muttered. "Say it." He winced. "We ripped your buttons in front of your students." "And," Corey swallowed, "we laughed at you. We humiliated you." Mia nodded slowly. "And last night you learned what happens when you humiliate someone who knows how to defend themselves. But that's not the lesson I want you to remember." Her gaze swept over each of them. "Strength isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you choose to protect. You embarrassed me in front of children who trust me. You could have scared them for life. You made them think it's normal for someone to treat a woman that way. That ends now." Dylan's voice was barely above a whisper. "We're sorry." "Not to me," Mia said. "To the staff. And when my students arrive, you'll apologize to them too. They need to see that people who do wrong can admit it and make it right." The boys exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. Right on cue, the principal walked in, having been briefed by Mia that some community helpers wanted to speak before class. A few teachers peeked in curiously as Brent, Corey, and Dylan stood. Brent's voice shook as he began. "We want to apologize for what we did to Miss Carter yesterday. It was wrong. We were wrong. We're sorry." Corey and Dylan echoed him, their words clumsy but genuine. Mia didn't smile, but there was a glint of approval in her eyes. "Thank you. Now go." They left, quickly disappearing down the hallway. Minutes later, the children began to arrive, filling the room with chatter and giggles. Several glanced at Mia's blouse, fully buttoned today, and whispered to each other. She gathered them on the rug. "Something happened yesterday that wasn't okay," she began gently. "Someone tried to make me feel small. But I want you to remember, nobody has the right to touch you without permission. And if someone tries, you can stand up for yourself. You can speak up. You are worth defending." Dozens of little heads nodded, their faces earnest. In their eyes, she saw the real victory, not in how she'd handled the bullies, but in the seed of courage she'd just planted. Outside, Mia caught sight of Brent, Corey, and Dylan, lingering near the gate, shooting her a quick, almost respectful glance before walking away. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself a small, private smile. This chapter was closed. In the quiet after the storm, Mia reflected on what had happened. She hadn't just defended herself, she had reclaimed her dignity on her own terms. Violence had never been her goal. The fight had been a tool, not the lesson. What mattered was showing that boundaries are worth enforcing. That silence in the face of humiliation only feeds cruelty. She hoped the boys would carry the weight of that experience, not as fear of her, but as understanding of the harm they could cause and the respect they owed others. More importantly, she wanted her students to remember the message she had given them. Their bodies, their dignity, and their self-worth are not negotiable. Strength, Mia realized, wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about choosing when to stand firm. and when to teach others how to stand with you. That, in the end, was the real victory.